Good morning. Welcome everybody to On the Porch. I'm your state representative, Jane Garibay, representing part of Windsor and all of Windsor Locks. I'm here today with Greg Vaca. I've known Greg for years, and we haven't seen each other in years, and we got together and talked, and we just found so much in common. He's an exceptional young man. He's also the founder of Grava Properties, a real estate venture focused on urban mixed-use development in the traditional downtowns of Greater Hartford. He is a native of Windsor and a passionate urbanist. We can ask him about that in a little bit. He worked in investment banking and real estate development in New York City and Brazil for nearly 2 decades before relocating last year to the area with his family. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you here, Jane. It's so great that we could, reconnect and find that we, are kindred spirits and have so much in common, especially the love for this region and all the excitement that's happening around it.
Right. And I don't know if you saw, but the Connecticut Planners Association gave the Montgomery Mill building in Windsor Locks an award yesterday. Mm-hmm. As it is with you, it's my passion. I think it's what's going to save our small businesses, and there's just so much to talk about. But what does it mean to be an urbanist?
Yeah, it's interesting that today that you sort of, that term exists, sort of like zoning and other things that, for all of human history did not exist, but that we've sort of placed on ourselves to, to regulate ourselves and understand sort of what our opinions are. But in urbanist, I believe that, and I've heard this from a famous mayor in Brazil that I work closely with, that, the center of our cities and towns are our souls. They're where we get together. They're where we are together with each other. They're where we see each other and have fun and share, food and work and live out our lives. I've really seen the impact that positive urban design and architecture can have on places, and really fomenting and supporting that sort of unity and economy. And I think, that is really the future of this region. I think is very linked into, becoming, in a sense, more urban. I think people sometimes misunderstand what that means. But I think, being, an urban environment, separate from, say, a suburban or rural environment, is one in which, you can get around personally without the use of a car. One in which, buildings and people and businesses and a mix of uses are all together in one place in close proximity. That sort of foments this creativeness and this energy that, that a lot of these places have seen a little bit less of, given that we passed through this era of, it was urban renewal and then sort of just a car-oriented economy that we still find each other, ourselves in, and certainly will continue to. But I think, returning to these more, purposefully and traditionally urban built environments is going to be very positive for ourselves, not just for our businesses, but for ourselves as we find community in those spaces.
Right. We're kind of going back because it wasn't that long ago, but when I was growing up, I actually had friends whose mothers didn't drive, and they lived down near the shopping center. But you had a deli, you had the grocery store, you had shopping, you had everything that you needed. There was a bus to go. We used to go by bus into Hartford to G Fox and Sage Allen. So you could get away with one car in a family, which the husband usually at that time would be the one to take it to work, but you had it for family use. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of went to the sprawl. And I think especially with your generation and younger, part is because the earning power isn't there like it was in the 60s and 70s. But they want to live right where they can get to everything. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's such a confluence of factors sort of contributing to where we are today. I would say, when you think of suburban sprawl, I think a lot of people think of the Eisenhower interstate system and the enormous economy that created. The decades of growth that happened afterwards. It sort of defined a lot of who we modern Americans think of ourselves as. That. As, we are we are the people that, built the highways and created this, this wealth. I think the issue is that now that all of that infrastructure from sprawl has come due, as sort of the useful life is ending, you realize that there is just an enormous ticket price associated with that you don't see in the first generation of that infrastructure, right? And as we're starting to make very difficult decisions about what to do with that infrastructure, you see in Hartford this week that the Hartford 400 plan came out, which is incredible, and all these other plans that really show us with less infrastructure, sort of returning to a place that has less of less infrastructure. The road diet that you've been championing that I've been following closely. All these things are meant to sort of wean us off of this infrastructure that so many of us think of as an asset, when actually it's just a large liability. And so when you think we're now in a place where suburban sprawl has increased the liabilities on our municipalities, at the same time as the way we've structured education and other things has created enormous liabilities for our people, right? For especially younger people who are this is the most indebted generation in a long time. So I would say there are both urban preferences, among the young and the old alike, that are bringing people more into this desire for walkability and community, really. But there's also economic pressures associated with affordability, because the single family housing model is just very expensive. It came out this week, a report that comes out every year on the most expensive, the least affordable states. And Connecticut was ranked number 2 in the country as the least affordable. So you think and that's a judgment of how your population can afford the housing available in that state. Yeah, and I think there's some confusion about what that actually means, about what affordability means, and why it's sort of one of the most important, I think, issues of our time now. And I think the affordability crisis is about several things, but one thing it's really about is a lack of housing. It's a lack of housing options, right? When you think about, if you go back all of human history, and that's Windsor's history, it's Windsor Locks' history, all of these places were urban and rural, right? And then these places became suburban, which means you lost both the urban character, the busy, bustling downtowns, and you lost the rural character, right? You still have those on the fringes. And I would say it's weird to say that the downtown is a fringe, but in terms of where the center of gravity is in town, sometimes it is outside of downtowns, right? You think about the El Grasso in Windsor Locks versus Main Street. I mean, what is busier? That's an easy point. So I think when you look about how these things have changed, you've arrived at a place today that is very different than it has been for all of human history. I would like to believe that we will look back in 100 years and say, oh yeah, there was this 50-year, 70-year window in all of human history in which we had an experiment on car-oriented society that it wasn't what we thought it was, and is now less important than it was. It's not going to go away, and it shouldn't. It's interesting. A lot of people say, well, is it urban versus suburban? There's no such thing as urban versus suburban. It is urban and suburban, right? The single family home will continue to be, I believe, for a significant period of time, the most desirable place to live. I live in a single family home. I have 2 small children. I'm at the point and place in my life where that has value.
Right.
That's not the problem. The problem is the single family homes in Windsor make up 89% of the whole housing stock. Much of the rest is 2-family houses that used to be single family, right? So basically you have a demand that's demographic and economic, right, for apartment housing, and that is just not being met. And when you deal with macroeconomics, when demands aren't being met, strange things happen, right? You wind up, I'm sure a lot of people in town have noticed that a lot of houses are being rented today. Because there are no apartments, the houses are being rented. And both a landlord and a renter don't have the same incentives or motives to upkeep the property or maintain in a certain place that a owner that lives there would. So I think people, I'm sure you're hearing this and seeing this. This is even a concern. Well, it's like, when you repress supply in the economy, like the demand will find a way.
Right. Well, it used to be. I know. I grew up, with the idea you had to buy your single family home. You had to invest. That was your best investment. And when I'm finding with younger people today is they don't see that as the best investment necessarily, or they can't afford it by themselves, especially right out of college. So many of them go into apartments where everything is taken care of And it depends what part of your life you're in. Once you have kids, it's kind of nice
Absolutely.
yard. I truly believe that neighborhoods are important. We have the Wilson Deerfield area in Windsor, and that's a neighborhood. It used to be vibrant. If you talk to Mike from Wilson Paint, he said a Friday night they were open till 9 o'clock at night, and everybody would stop by. They'd be buying for the weekend. It was a vibrant hub, and they've done a lot down there, and it's coming back. But that's one part of Windsor. Then we have Windsor Center, like you said, the road diet. By the way, I got asked, what does it mean, road diet? And I was like, I don't know why we call it the road diet.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we have we basically, when society became more suburban, the decisions of how people moved through places was turned over to engineers, right?
Yeah.
It became about passing through a place, and that's how roads are dimensioned. It's to pass through a place as quick, as expediently as possible. Now, there was the notion, which seems logical, that the more lanes you have and the more space you have for cars, the less traffic. It is something that may be counterintuitive, but it is a proven fact that the more lanes you have, the more traffic you have. This is a fact. 3 papers were published on this in the last year. This is well documented fact. It is a fallacy that the more, if you add another lane, you'll have less traffic. You have more traffic. I know it's hard to, it's something called induced demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you talk about road diets, certain places have become basically highways through centers, where there is far too much asphalt. There's far more asphalt than needed when there is not enough of other things that are needed. For example, street crossings, street parking. When we talk about road diets, a lot of times it's making it more comfortable to cross the street.
Right.
You think of Broad Street. Broad Street, in a way, is a 5.5 lane highway, right? That's not designed. It's not it makes people nervous crossing it. Right. So, with the road diet, you would actually, and I've seen the plan, which it's very typical of a road diet, where you would take, you give street parking, and then you put these islands, on the sidewalks to bring the sidewalks, the crossing points to shorter distances. Right. So that's very attractive. The other thing this has is when you do street parking, it's actually what's called a traffic calming measure.
Yeah.
Right. Because when a driver drives by a parked car, inherently, they're aware of the car, they're aware of the doors, they're looking to see if someone's going to open a door, even though it is far safer than not having them. It actually makes people drive slower. Right? People naturally drive slower, which is what you need to create an environment where people, where walking and biking is favored.
Well, living in Mexico City, I would be all for speed bumps. You can't go 50 feet without having a speed bump. The whole city is calmed down, except for on the highways.
Yeah,
but people here just don't like those. The road diet. But why do we call it a diet?
A diet because we have too many roads.
Okay, so
because we're going on a diet. Like we're trying to like people's. What I've heard a lot is that when the Eisenhower system started, interstate system started, it created such immense growth. It was also a post-war period where the U.S., because our allies were destroyed, we were producing for the world, right? So it was just an economic boom. And because it led to so much growth, there was the feeling over every decade to today, we should just do more of this.
Right.
We should just keep doing more and more. And there wasn't the mechanism to say, oh, wait, do we have too much of it? So now that this has been studied over the last several decades, we understand that we have way too much of it. We understand we have too much highways. People think of this infrastructure as a good thing, and it's hard to really break that down, change that mentality. Infrastructure is a necessary thing, but it is a liability. It gives you no revenue, especially in Connecticut, there's no tolls. It gives you no revenue and only has costs. That's a liability, right? So we have too much of it. So if we had less of it, we could actually have less to maintain and turn that space over to other much more productive uses.
Absolutely.
Parking being the number one in a downtown.
Well, right. And we also have the center of Pequannock, that people see that as their village. And that's kind of, there is a restaurant. I believe the post office is still there, a school, churches. So within Windsor, we have our 3 communities. Like you said, in Windsor Locks, you have, El Abrazo Turnpike, and then you have Main Street. So all these things happening, and it's all important. I feel people are wanting their community back. They want that community feel. I see it in Windsor Center. They want to walk places. They want to bike. We bought electric bikes or assist bikes. You can go normally, or you can have that boost when you're going up that high hill. Yeah. So you get to really travel and see, different places. And I think it's the only way we're going to save our small businesses, unless we want to go to an order online type of society, that's the only way you can get your goods. You lose part of your community, your mom and pop shops, etc. But if we can revitalize our main streets, bring in more walk traffic, more units, more apartments, etc. They'll be able to survive. We're also in a more transient people nowadays. A lot of people like apartments because, like you went to New York City, you went to Brazil. People travel and they change for jobs. I think they said it's every 1.7 years is the average people stay. So there is a place for apartments. There's a place for condos. There's a place for the single family housing, multifamily. All those different things.
Yeah, this is the center. Our villages are where that happens, and I wrote some things down because you made 3 points that I think are very, very important. The idea of community, the idea of this feeling, which psychologically as humans we sort of always believe that the past is better than the present. That's why every generation thinks their music was better and their lives were better. But there is something about sort of the loss of community. Where I would say the United States, and this is you could go back to Alexis de Tocqueville, it was very well documented that Americans were sort of super community animals, right? For all of history, right? And what happened was when we started the suburban, paradigm, the suburban growth model, we still for a time still had all those sort of fundamental organizations. You think of the Masons and the Kiwanis and the Rotary Club and all these social clubs, the JCs. There were all these very busy and prosperous social clubs associated with these societies that made their way into the suburbs, and ever since then have been declining. And so there is a sense of, we're losing our community, we're losing our community organizations, we're losing our community institutions. The community itself, the downtown areas have been like hollowed out because of urban renewal. And really a lot of that is associated with a loss of proximity. Because, it is much easier to foster community, like my mother is from the Bronx. It's much easier to foster community when there are thousands of people on your block,
right.
You see them all the time and you're in the same social groups and in the same activities and everything. It is an order of magnitude more difficult when meeting someone else involves getting into a car. It just is. So I would say it is remarkable, and it's really a tribute to all the great work that First Town Downtown has done and what the local organizations have done to really hold together a real sense of community, a great, wonderful community, despite just enormous, all of these pressures and all of these factors that just complicate it and make it so much difficult. So I'd say that's about community. I feel like a return to our centers is really a return to community, is really shoring up the community, and not for the people that are just going to move there and for the businesses there, but for everyone. Right. Which is sort of the second point you make, that, about you think of the retail and the economics of the retail. In these downtowns, when suburban growth came there, they were strip centers, strip malls, right? You go like Dexter Plaza and Arthur Drug and all these, there were all these big strip centers that was the new convenience car oriented retail. Now, once you're in a car going left or going right, you're sort of, you don't care, right? Your options are open. And eventually those convenience centers moved to where it was most convenient by car, which is next to the highways. So first we demolished our downtowns to build the strip malls, and then that retail went elsewhere. So you think about, we're not going to be a society that only orders things online, because some things you just have so much value to do in person, right? Like the floor, picking out flowers, going out to eat, going to a show, like there's a lot of
shopping.
Doing a lot of specific shopping, but especially food and beverage. Like it's, that stuff will be done that way. The question is, how do you anchor sort of a sustain, how do you sustain that to make those businesses prosperous? You need sort of a core, I believe, and from what I've read, you need a core group population downtown that sort of is the baseline, that sustains these things. Why you think of a mall. A mall cafeteria sells one meal a day, right? And it's basically an amenity. It doesn't really make money, right? A restaurant that only sells one meal a day, which is like what you would have in a commercial center, barely pays the rent.
Right.
A restaurant that serves 3 meals a day is a prosperous restaurant. It employs twice as many people. It is, it serves so much a wider array of needs, but it's only going to be able to do that if people live there, because people aren't going out to breakfast unless you live nearby. Like that, there is that thing where that difference between selling 2 meals and 3 meals or being open, X hours or X plus 2 hours per day is the difference between you paying your rent and you being prosperous. So having a core group of people living downtown, which is now, again, thanks to the amazing work done both in Windsor Locks and Windsor. I know all these buildings, I've been through all of them, and they're special. It's not the cookie cutter stuff. Right. Especially Montgomery Mills. That's not even fair, right? They were starting with such an amazing bones there.
It's incredible, though. The parties that they pulled together, I don't think people realize, to get the financing, to get someone that's invested in this type of development, to convince people that affordable housing, which is part of that, isn't like the projects of New York City, the way it was thought of years ago. They are absolutely beautiful. I love that project. And it was the year before historic preservation came into, a thought process. And whoever was mayor or first selectman at the time took down all Main Street, just raised the buildings. I've seen pictures.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
Aghast, with no plan in sight of what they were going to do. And so it became kind of a big strip mall. And they've just done so much to revitalize that too. I'm going to represent both towns because both get it.
They get it. I'll tell you, when I first saw the Windsor Locks plan, it was hard to believe that was. I'm in Connecticut, and I love Connecticut. Connecticut is the best state in the country, right? Like, part of the reason why I think, like, I'm so amazed, as sort of a parenthesis, why all these downtowns have been revitalized earlier. First, it's enormously complicated, but the reason why is, this is the most educated and prosperous state in the country.
Absolutely.
It should have the highest quality public spaces in downtown centers, right? And I would say that the plan in Windsor Locks, and I've seen so many plans in my career, like, is so up to the moment, and if that I told Chris, if that happens, which it will, I know, because so many great people are working on it, and it is happening. Right. It would anchor a renaissance in that town that will do, I think, enormous good.
Well, once you get one developer in with it and it starts, then others want to get on board with the success. So yeah, that is like huge. And when people say affordable, it means a starting teacher can afford to live there. Someone right out of college. There's a whole range of people that can then access housing. So that's incredible. And I love the apartments behind our town hall. They went up so quick and were so well done.
So well done, yeah.
They stay full and so it is kudos. And I see a lot happening in the state. I do have to put in a plug for Patrick McMahon, who's also a Windsor boy, and he's the Connecticut Main Street for the state of Connecticut, executive president and CEO. And I see, being a legislator, how hard Patrick works with us on these. We were debating a couple of bills that we put in through the Main Street Working Group yesterday that look positive, that'll help. And just doing that. And with First Town also has been plugging away for years. But that's where, if people want to put energies, because you can be someone who lives in Windsor, and you can join First Town Downtown and help promote, this idea. And I just love that Windsor Center has so many young people living there, and it is scary. If I had stopped my car to let people cross once, and coming behind me was this oil truck. And I saw one of the town employees, he was getting ready to cross and he backed off and I looked up and that guy just barely missed me. They are going way too fast. And we're also working on that because I know citizens, the traffic has gotten much worse with COVID, the way people react, the way they're driving. So if we can slow that down for our center of town,
it's so important.
local businesses. And I also really want that bike trail.
I know, me too. We spoke about that. I love. I mean, that, you know what? I feel like it's I think good ideas are, I mean, maybe I'm just an optimist by nature, but I think good ideas are inevitable, right? Especially when you have good people working on them.
When you start talking, right.
Yeah. It's I would say, you mentioned, CT Main Streets and Pat McMahon, I say the good thing about the suburban model was it was so easy. It's so easy. Nothing's easier than, buying grassland and putting a house there. It costs enormous public subsidy through all the infrastructure, but it's for the developer, that's easy, right? They, cookie cutter, just do one after other. Building in downtowns is immensely difficult. It is immensely difficult, which, I mean, I think for viewers and for, people in town that may be curious about this, that's the reason why it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened because it is immensely difficult. And having people like yourself and like Pat McMahon and people really working on this is essential. It doesn't happen otherwise. I'd like to be I'm now going to be a part of this, but it's something where it's so much more complex. And I think one of the unfortunate things about suburban sprawl and that suburban mindset is we have an aversion to the complex. We have aversion to the messy. We want everything clean and nice and, your white picket fence in your house and everything. When humans are not that way, societies are not that way, families are not that way, communities are not that way, and they shouldn't be, right? Downtown is going, you talk about traffic, and I think it's going to be great to be working with you over the next period of time to change this mindset where you say, I think of traffic and parking. Oh, traffic being bad. Traffic has to be bad. Bad traffic is good in downtown. There's no place you've ever wanted to go that does not have bad traffic. There's no urban environment you've ever been where there's plentiful parking and no traffic. It doesn't exist, and for good reason. Because the space occupied by cars cannot be occupied by humans at the same time. It's just geometry, right? So I would say the other thing is parking. The idea that parking is good or desirable. It's desirable on the street as a traffic calming measure and it's necessary, but parking is not good. We don't need more parking. We need less parking, and it's hard to break that mindset.
So what happened with those strip malls is people got used to driving their car and they want to put one foot out of the car into the establishment they're going. West Hartford, you have parking centers and you walk to where you want to go. So we have to re-educate. And I'm guilty too, you drive around till you get the closest space, up at the mall. So we have to re-educate. And it started a few years ago just for exercise. Park the farthest place you can to walk and you just got your walking, so we do have to see what we want and change our mentality and educate ourselves. And it's all of us, it's not just our listeners. I'm learning every day as you are, I can tell.
For sure.
Everything and I do. So I do see a bright future for us and I find it exciting. We have a lot of things in the works up at the Capitol. We put in for bonding for that road diet. Representative McGee, Representative Gibson, and myself. So we're hoping that goes through, and with a few laws to help support funding for Connecticut Main Street. So we'll try to keep those things going. But I do look forward to working with you. I love the synergy. I had called First Time Downtown, Sharon Seelig, and I said, oh God, this is the most excited I've been in a while because you find kindred spirits that understand it and get it. And you get it even way more than I do, so I can learn, etc. So I'm really excited.
No, I'm very excited. I think Windsor. I honestly believe Windsor Locks. Although it's an embarrassment of riches in terms of amenities, in terms of location, in terms of. I mean, there's a train to New York downtown, right? Like there's just so much going, parks and schools. Like
we
so
already
much
have
for the towns. Yeah, that I think the downtown. It's only. it's only managing the complexity. You know, it's
Right.
only getting people to understand, you know, okay, what do we want and how do we get that done? You know, that's
To
it.
think ahead, right, to
Yeah,
just understand
it's
what you
complex, but
do.
it's complex in the way that, you know, getting 5 people with different interests, stakeholders together and say, hey, let's come together and say, how does everyone walk out like with the best result, you know, with a
Right.
revitalized downtown? And I think it's inevitable. And I think, you know, we're on its doorstep, frankly, with the road
I
diet.
do too, but that's a great point. We already have so much in both towns. You know, we have a major airport.
Oh my gosh.
Windsor has Loomis KP School, a major,
Education institution. Yeah.
system here. We have great schools. Windsor Locks, the governor visited a couple days ago because of their work in getting their teachers vaccinated so quickly and their supportive
Mhm.
teachers, and also getting kids back into the classroom. They're in the low 30% of those that are still learning remotely because they still have the choice. Um, I know years ago, Senator Blumenthal went to our high school for its tech department. It's one of the top in the states and doing work with NASA and all these things. So you're right. We are so rich to begin with. We have everything there. It's like having all the Play-Doh. Now let's build the castle, right?
Right.
It is. It's just so exciting.
It's
So,
very exciting.
do you have any closing remarks that you'd like people to know?
Well, well, I mean, you know, I think that again, I think Windsor and Windsor Locks and Greater Hartford in general has its best days ahead of it. I think you suddenly have all these real visionary people and projects. You know, the Hartford 400, the North Atlantic Rail. I mean, we didn't talk about that. If that happens, I mean, the impact on Windsor and Windsor Locks would be incredible. Would be incredible. But I think as we look at life post COVID, because now that's
Mhm.
sort of the springtime of COVID, you know, where that's ending and we're getting back to our lives. I think this is a real opportunity for us to come back together after after a long time apart. I know you're very present, but a lot of people have stayed in their homes this time, you know, and I think it's a great opportunity for people to get back together and say, hey, you know, who do we want to be? You know, what do we want our town? How do we want our town to reflect, you know, our, you know, biggest dreams and our desires in terms of, you know, having the kids that go to high school and then go off to college and afterwards, you know, have some place where they could live and you know,
Right.
rival other alternatives they'll have in more urban environments. Or I think all the time about, you know, my folks and other people's folks, you know, who are in their single family home. You know, a lot of people are in their single family home longer than they'd like to be because they don't have alternatives, you know, that are attractive. Like it would be great that the solution could be a place where we can stay, you know, where people, you know, Connecticut's almost famous for, losing population, which is a fallacy. It doesn't lose population. The population is flat. The reason why so many people leave is because there's no housing for them, and more housing stock naturally decays. This is a parenthesis, but you know, naturally decays than is
And
produced.
a lot of people leave because of the weather. That is true. And even people that are leaving for the weather, they might say, oh, because of this or that. But weather is a major reason for people,
Sure, you're
you
not
know,
going to recap. You're not going to maintain everyone, but I would suspect, and I've said this to a lot of people, I would suspect a lot of the weather, saying like, oh, because of the weather, that is true for a lot of people. But for a lot of people, it's making a decision, well, do I stay in the single family home or do I go to
right,
Florida? Because, you know, if your community was there, you would stay, you know, I think if there was a stronger community, I think more people would
right.
stay.
Want your community. Absolutely. I agree. And
Yeah.
I feel that community. I see people that leave and I'm like, how can they? You know, it's like, um, but everybody makes their decision. But I agree. If we can
Yeah.
build more community and connect ourselves more, it'll get us through worse times too, because, COVID has changed us as a people
Yes.
and for many good things too. You know,
Yes.
sometimes we say
Yeah, I think it's helped us see, you know, I think we value each other more. I know the stock, I like to joke that the stock in grandparents has gone up 1,000%, you know, like I feel like we didn't appreciate each other as much when we had each other. And I think now, I think post COVID, we're gonna have the opportunity to get together and say, hey, you know, let's build a place where we can just be together more. You know, let's
right,
build, let's rebuild our villages in a way that reflects who we are and who we want to be. And I think that's a huge opportunity. I think because we have such great leadership, from you and others that
Oh, there's
that
so
really
many.
have the vision that to say like, hey, this is what we want. And now suddenly there's going to be funding for a lot of things. So I think this is the time. Interest rates are never going to be below zero, right? So I
Right.
think, from an economics perspective, we are at a unique moment post-COVID to really say, hey, this is what we want to build. Let's go out there and build it.
I'm right there with you. So I look forward to working with you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Everybody's clapping. You're back this way. Absolutely. So I want to thank everybody watching. I hope you've enjoyed this interview with Greg Vaca, Windsor boy. His family's been here forever. In my forever. Anyways, if you have any questions, you know where to reach me. And I thank you, and we'll see you next week.